love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
More rewards, more savings. With American Express Business Gold, earn up to $395 back in annual statement credits on eligible purchases at select shipping, food delivery, and retail subscription merchants, including the $155 Walmart Plus monthly membership credit and $240 flexible business credit. Enjoy the benefits of membership with the Amex Business Gold Card. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
So good, so good, so good.
Great brands, great prices. Everyone's got a reason to rack.
Because they have framed jeans.
Nike? Yes.
Just so many good brands.
Vince, Kurt Geiger London, Rag & Bone, and more are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. You never know what you'll find, but you know it's going to be so good. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Selena dreams of being broken in Dovier and is saved by Kale waking her to the day of Sam Hewen. Though she's able to spend her time with her friends in the palace throughout the day, Selena is confined to her bedroom during the evening's festivities. But a phantom breeze calls Selena's attention to a draft in her room, which leads her to a hidden door safeguarding secret passages to forgotten parts of Rifthold Stone Castle. During her illicit exploration, Selena uncovers a secret route to escape the castle and a hidden window to spy on the Great Hall. When she realizes Kale is returning to check on her, Selena rushes back to her room, where Kale and Dorian both pay her an unexpected visit. But the night's adventures don't end there, and Selena is greeted by her dead ancestor, Fate, and the evil that lurks beneath the castle. The morning brings ill tidings of another death of a king's champion.
Hey there, we're Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, your book besties who take the novels you love seriously.
We embrace and respect modern fantasy, romance, and romantasy books written by women. And so it's in our nature to analyze these books as we would any other novel we might have dissected in school.
With our combined 13 years of literary academic training, we use our education to analyze and give voice to the reasons why you may love or hate today's popular books.
This is part 1 of this week's episode, where we're discussing chapters 23 through 26 of Sarah J. Maas's debut novel, Throne of Glass. For a complete list of episodes and chapter breakdowns, be sure to check out our Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk.
Before we dive in, let's talk about Spilt. God, I will never... That stands for, I know, we could might easily have to change this.
We can change it to split. We're going to get
No. I'm doing this. I'm going to learn it by the end. This stands for spoilers, perspective, interpretation, language, and themes.
Spoilers. While our discussion is about Throne of Glass, important context from the first 3 novels in the series will be discussed without spoiler warnings. That is specifically Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. This is not a read-along for anyone who hasn't read the first 3 books, and you will be spoiled from here on out. So please, take this as your only spoiler warning. For all other spoilers beyond Heir of Fire and other SJM works, we will keep those to the breadcrumbs and broomsticks area at the end of the episode.
Perspective and interpretation. What we discuss in this episode are strictly our personal interpretations of the text. We do not speak for Sarah J. Maas and in no way know her intentions for her books or characters. We also know our listeners have their own personal views and opinions, and we encourage you to share your thoughts with us because every perspective and interpretation is worth exploring.
Language. Even though Jac tries to keep her swearing to a minimum for the sake of Maria, explicit language does occur, and it's mostly my fault.
Maria is my mother. Shout out, Mom. Themes. We also discuss some heavy subjects throughout the podcast that can include themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death. While we will do our best to give trigger warnings for the darker themes, we will discuss these topics when they are important to the text. Listener discretion is advised.
As always, we love keeping the conversation going because our listeners are so good at finding things we've overlooked or missed completely. You can share your interpretation of the text with us by posting on social media, tagging us in stories, sending us DMs, or submitting to the form on our website. We also post more exclusive content and host live streams for our Patreon supporters. You can find us at patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk. This week, we're at the halfway point of the book, and so we want to take a moment to discuss the character development of our three characters, Celaena, Chaol, and Dorian, and we'll leave that for the end of the episode.
Themes we're going to see in this section include religion and destiny.
Are you not reading the thread?
No, I'm saving that for later.
Okay.
I'm not going to give that away yet. That's going to be at the end of the episode. I'm going to surprise you. I mean, that's for future me.
Okay. Well,
4 hours from now.
I didn't copy it down for future use, so you're going to have to remember on your own.
Shit. Wow. No consideration for future me.
I didn't realize it was a future you thing.
There's asterisks.
That doesn't mean anything.
So before we dive in, though, I want to announce something very exciting, and that is we got tattoos.
Oh, I was like, did we discuss this beforehand?
This is my first tattoo. I never thought I would ever get a tattoo, but Amy also got a tattoo. So first you say yours, and then I'll say mine.
Sure. So I got my first bookish tattoo that I swore I was going to get in October of 2022. Wow. And I got a little ornament beaded
thing
looking jewelry thing on my ribs, but there is a symbol for Feyre, Bryce, and Aelin on it.
Yeah. And then I got You Do Not Yield on my forearm. Here's for the video, people. There's like the second skin plastic thing that's on top of it that I keep rubbing it. Never thought I'd ever get it in a million years, but here we are. And the most exciting part is that it's in folklore font.
And we went to a tattoo place called State of Grace.
I'm so excited. And then I didn't think I was going to go and get a tattoo yesterday. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, so you
had a dream.
I had a dream. And then it was happening into the reality. So 0.14, I'm a psychic.
Yeah. Or you just really wanted it really bad, and your subconscious was just like, just do it, please.
We are psychics.
Put us out of our misery.
We are psychics here. So let's dive in.
All right, so we start this episode in chapter 23, and the chapter opens with Celaena back in Endovier. Now, before we get started, let's recall last week's episode where Celaena has gone through this intense, humbling process. She is learning to be more self-aware and more honest about her reality in a way that she hasn't been up until this point in the novel. When you think about it, it makes sense because we are halfway through the novel, so we would expect some sort of change in Celaena's point of view. Now, because she has been humbled, we've seen her lose confidence in her ability to secure a spot in the Final Four. That doubt is now manifesting in her dreams. And in doing so, she's envisioning a reality where she is sent back to Endovier, and it is not a good one.
No, her nightmare is almost like a premonition. Quote, the rocks stretched for miles, rising into jagged fang-like mountains that pierce the cloudy sky. What's about to happen? We're about to find out that one of the champions is half eaten, and she's getting this dream where, Endovier, which is horrible, and she doesn't want to go back there, but there's clearly something animalistic in the threat here. And then I want to look into another part of her dream. Quote, in the frigid wind, she had little clothing to protect her from its stinging gusts. As she touched the dirty rags, her stomach rose in her throat. Her nightmare, also the other layer to her nightmare, is that she's wearing little to no clothing to quite literally protect her from the weather and from threats. And I think SGM has always done a really good job when it comes to not just like what clothing represents in armor and, a state of mind of all of our characters, but also dealing with PTSD. I think that we see that like really well done when we get into Akatar and Crescent City. And I don't think I appreciated just how early she touches on that in her books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. SGM spends so much time on Aelin's clothing, or Celaena spends so much time thinking about her clothing, that you think it's the folly of a young author, but then you realize it's actually intentional.
Yeah.
And it actually has meaning.
Yeah.
So, because we've talked about clothing being power, the lack of clothing is also symbolic of Celaena's powerlessness in Endovier.
Yep.
At the end of this nightmare, Celaena has this experience. Quote, tears stung her eyes and the whip cracked as it rose again. She would be killed this time. She would die from the pain of it. Now, Celaena survived a year in Endovier. And she survived the whippings and the brutality of that situation. So when she says she'll die from the pain of it, I actually think it's more about the pain associated with the shame of failing the competition in Rifthold and being sent back to Endovier, and the disappointment of having her hopes crushed when freedom was like right in front of her. And I recognize, well, she's become more self-aware. She's more honest about her reality. Well, that's true, but I don't think that means her pride doesn't still exist. Like pride is still there to be hurt.
Oh yeah.
And I think that would be the death of her ultimately.
Yeah, dreams speak so much about her mindset, because it also means that there is a certain level of acceptance that if she fails, death will meet her. Like there is no coming back for her, whether it's pride, whether it's going back to Endovier. But I think it also shows that she wants to live, especially after last episode when we were talking about her seeing that other prisoner who chose death, and, death by cop essentially. And it's, you're starting to really see that shift where she's like, no, I want to push through.
Yeah. Yeah. Where it's not just a game anymore. It's not just some stupid competition. This is her life or death. Now, when Celaena wakes up from this nightmare, quote, she was sweating and the sweat on her back felt uncomfortably like blood. We're seeing her dream, her nightmare, and reality are starting to meld right now. And I think that's important on this day where we're going to find out it's Sam Heughan, which is significant in various cultures, and how later in chapter 26, one of the chapters, 25, 26, Celaena is going to confuse dream with reality.
Also, SGM is really good at these visuals because, you may not know what it's like to have blood drip down your back, but you do know what it's like to have sweat come down your back. So even if you're not entirely sure of that sensation, you are able to still feel it. And that's some good description. It's a chef's kiss, I'll say. It was a chef's kiss. Now I want to look at the moment when Celaena wakes up from her nightmare and she notices that I'm bringing this up to her. This was in breadcrumbs, and I think I hoisted it up because I think it does really good foreshadowing that I want to touch on each time. So she notices that, quote, though her windows were shut, an odd draft from somewhere in her room kissed her face, smelling strangely of roses. We're going to see this throughout these next couple chapters, this idea of roses, the smell of roses. It's going to be a clue about the passageways. It's going to be a clue about Elena. It's going to be a lot of things leading up to it. So I think what I appreciate in SJM's in this current book is that there's a lot of foreshadowing and mirroring and bookending within chapters. So you may not get this, and we may get hints of it later, but it's all very introduced, teased out, and then wrapped up kind of within chapters.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's a great point. She is good at, she planted seeds for this early on in Celaena's arrival, but the more significant details aren't introduced until they're really relevant for the reader.
Yeah. So at this moment, Cale comes in. He's the one to wake her up from this dream. Prince Charming waking her up, which we're going to get another reference of Sleeping Beauty, Prince Charming a little bit later. But, he's no Prince Charming. In fact, he's kind of a little bit of aggressive about it when he wakes her up. Although he gets worried and there's a little bit of concern there because he, quote, gave her a shaky smile. I thought you were being murdered. His emotions are seeping through. It's, he cares. I love it when you can find moments where the asshole character cares. And Celaena, in a rare moment of honesty, and I guess it's not rare because she has been pretty honest, but in a moment of honesty that you may not expect from her, she says, quote, I was being whipped. She shook her head to remove the memory from her mind. What are you doing here? It's not even dawn. She crossed her arms, flushing slightly. So, there's this honesty. There's this moment where she's crossing her arms. She's covering herself. And that is not what we've gotten from Celaena, right? We get a very cocky, we get a very, here's my body type of character. And here she is kind of folding into herself, covering and being honest. So it's, I was like, wow, we should maybe note that.
I don't know how to segue into my next point.
You just go into it.
I'm just going to go into it. So it's at this point that we learn from Cale that it is Sam Heughan, which if I actually think maybe a listener brought this up ages ago in a listener thoughts long before I had read Throne of Glass. But Samhain is likely derived from Samhain, which is a Gaelic festival on the 1st of November that marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the quote-unquote darker half of the year. It is also a time when they honor their ancestors, I think, which makes sense because it's also for the rest of the world, you know, All Hallows Eve, Day of the Dead, lots of connections across different cultures here.
Yeah. And I think it's pronounced also Samhain, or something similar to that, is the hot actor from Outlander, who's just really attractive and Scottish. So shout out him.
So we bring this up because it is a little bit of a breadcrumb for Celaena's encounter with Elena later in this episode.
Chaol continues to be super uncomfortable with Celaena being an assassin. Actually, I think in this episode, I'm going to bring it up a few times of just how Chaol and Dorian are uncomfortable with her being an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And this holiday just makes it more clear because, again, think very Day of the Dead, think very Halloween. So there's this dead person element, ghostly element to it, right? Quote, "I never took you for a superstitious person. How does that fit into your career?" You know, there's this judgment into her career, and it fascinates both the men here, but they're also kind of grossed out by it. And I'm going to kind of compare it the way that like a man would almost react to a woman being interested in sex, or, you know, there's a connection and relevance between her being an assassin and her being a sex worker. And people might be like, wow, you be jumping. However, remember in previous episodes, Celaena was the one who compared her work to that of a concubine, of being a sex worker, because she was like a sex worker, or in this world was essentially taken on very young, was brought up to be raised to sell her body in different ways, and is expected to pay it all back. So I don't think that I'm reaching here when I compare it to sex work. And I also don't think I'm reaching here when I compare it to like a guy, not all men, obviously. I hate saying that phrase. You'll hear that. That'll be the last time. But like you sometimes get these men who are very almost, I don't want to say disgusted by women's pleasure and sex. No, I'm going to say it. Yeah. Disgusted by women's pleasure and sex work. And it's the fact that it's her career. And again, there's that fascination and being horrified of her choosing that. And I also, you know, I'm going to say this early on. We find out later that Chaol thinks that she's a virgin. I want to confirm, spoiler, she had sex with Sam, right?
I don't know that they did.
I'm pretty sure that they did. I even Googled it.
Okay, well, if Google says it, it must be true.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. Reddit pages.
No judgment on my part.
There is an assumption there, though. So I just he is kind of fascinated with her sex and career.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, kind of staying into that theme that she has going on, quote, "She glared at him over her shoulder before she strode into the bathing chamber, Chaol close behind. She paused on the threshold. 'Are you going to join me?' she said, and Chaol stiffened, realizing his error. He slammed the door in response." So now Celaena is back to using sex as a weapon, and also we've talked about thresholds thresholds mark a moment of shifting, of poignant moments. And I think it could be her shifting back into her use of humor and sex as armor.
Yeah, or you could also look at it as, despite maybe a mutual attraction between them, Chaol's not ready to cross that threshold into that kind of intimacy with her.
Yeah, I love that. Quick pause.
Assassin's Blade spoiler. No, she doesn't.
She doesn't have sex with who?
Sam.
I Googled the same thing.
I think they barely started to have a intimate relationship before he was killed. The reason why Celaena ends up sleeping with Chaol in the next book is because she waited too long with Sam and they never had the opportunity.
Oh.
And so she forces...
Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on Reddit. Yeah. They don't sleep together. They're portrayed as having a close relationship.
Okay, well, actually, this will prove a different one of my points later on, even more concerningly so. But, ew, this is about to give a... I just want you to know, this is going to make a point I make later so much more cringy. So,
Great.
I know. Okay, so just, I want to pin that. Kale is fascinated with Selena's sex. Like, her having it.
Yeah, and whether or not it's true, he's making assumptions based on what information? Yeah. No information. Just based on observing her and talking to her, but never outright asking her the question or receiving information from her about it.
Absolutely. So we'll get into that virginity talk later.
Right. Because, and one other thing, only Dorian knows about Sam. Kale does not know about Sam.
Yeah.
So Kale, again, is making assumptions about a woman and her body and her choices on no information.
Male gaze.
Male gaze.
He is deep in his male gaze with her.
Yeah. Okay. We'll pin that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it. Once Selena is dressed and ready for breakfast, she meets Kale back out in her apartments and she digs into her porridge with fervor. Quote, all that was needed was a heap. No, 3 heaps of sugar and some hot cream. And okay, porridge is arguably the most boring food. And I think at least to me, is very connotative of prison. You know, it's gruel. It's just kind of grains and water. And here you go. It's boring. It's not actually very nutritious, I don't think. But in this moment, it is a balm in the aftermath of Selena's nightmare of Endovier. It's especially true because she gets to take advantage of access to cream and sugar, which are luxuries I can guarantee she didn't have in Endovier, and any prison would not necessarily provide to their prisoners. So we're seeing her use these things in excess. Like, who needs 3 heaps of sugar in their porridge?
I mean if you talked about how gross it is, then someone who wants to eat that.
It's just basically pure sugar is what's going on right now.
I like to imagine it's similar to oatmeal.
Yeah, but runny oatmeal. Have you ever had Chinese oatmeal?
No.
It would be like that. It's very runny.
Okay.
And the only way they make it good is to pour a whole can of sweetened condensed milk in it.
Sounds delicious.
So it's just pure sugar. Anyway, right now, watching Selena eat this food, I think it's more about mental strength than physical strength for her. If we think of it from a food as power perspective, she is trying to ground herself in her reality through the use of eating food and mentally fortifying herself. This is emphasized when later Selena thinks, quote, oh, she loved porridge, but perhaps it needed another spoonful of sugar. Her appreciation for her plain breakfast is really an appreciation for her circumstances and her distance from Endovier. If given any other choice on any other day, Selena might have been like, why can't I have bacon?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, but then because she woke up from that Endovier dream.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying.
The smallest amount of nutrition and luxury is excessive for her, and she's so grateful for it.
I love it. So I want to look at that exact same moment, but through some might call a feminist lens. Everything comes back to sex with me.
Yep.
The quote is, all that was needed was a heap. No, 3 heaps of sugar and some hot cream. And are you going to temple? That's Kale who says that. I'm allowed to go to temple, but not to the feast. She took a spoonful of the porridge. Religious observances shouldn't be denied to anyone. And the feast is a show of debauchery. Ah, I see. She swallowed another bite. Oh, she loved porridge, but perhaps another spoonful of sugar. Well, are you going? We need to leave soon if you are. No, she said through her food. One of our themes that we're going to talk about is religion and the different, and even spirituality. I'm going to clump into that. And we're going to see different characters and their relationships to religion and spirituality. But what I like here is the fact that Kale discusses the feast as debauchery. And what we actually will see a little bit of the feast later, and there's no debauchery, there's just dancing and eating. It's a party. Mm-hmm. But Kale deems it debauchery. And what is she doing right now? She's eating excessively sweet food. She is herself in the middle of debauchery. And of course he would view food as debauchery because he views her as sex and she is eating excessively sweet food.
And he's always remarked on how much she's capable of eating.
Exactly. So, and he is just like, just say you're horny for her. Just say you're horny for her. That's it. That's all you need to do.
Just come clean.
Yeah. Stop trying to be like debauchery and food. Kale, who is very by the book, though, he's very strict. He's the one who's interested in Aelin, or Selena, in Selena going to temple. Even though she's not invited to the feast, she's allowed to go worship. Quote, I imagined that an assassin would take more interest in the Day of the Dead. She made a demented face as she continued. I worship in my own way. Perhaps I'll make a sacrifice or two of my own. And he just like won't let her assassinness go, right? Like he just keeps making these little digs, these little comments. And I think he's trying to understand her too, of like, how is it that this person that I'm growing to respect and like and horny for, how are you, the sweet, innocent little virgin, capable of such murder?
Yeah, I just put together the fact that right now Selena's saying, I worship in my own way. Perhaps I'll make a sacrifice or two of my own. Tomorrow,
yeah,
Kale's going to find a dead body that has very strong witchcraft vibes around the nature of the murder. And what does he do? He comes and is like, where were you last night? Where were you last night? Where were you last night? I didn't even put that together, that Selena's setting the stage for Kale to doubt her again.
Yeah.
I'll speak more about that later.
As will I.
At the end of the scene, once Kale leaves Selena's apartments, Selena's thoughts go back to her nightmare. Quote, though she tried to forget it, the sound of the whip still snapped in her ears. Now, when I was initially reading this scene and how Selena's constantly like, oh, I love porridge. Porridge is so great. It's so good. More sugar, please. The conversation felt really off to me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized by the end of the scene that it's less about the way SJM wrote it and about not being consistent with her characters. It's more about the fact that Selena's trying to keep the conversation going and trying to distract herself and convince Kale she's fine so that she can keep thoughts of her nightmare and the whip at bay. And it's only when she's confronted with silence that the nightmare comes back.
Yeah. I love that. Also, humor is her way to fill in the silence too. Mm-hmm. And not have to hear the trauma. So then the second that humor is gone, the second that Kale's gone, what she hears again is her trauma.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism.
It is. Don't I understand it?
Mm-hmm.
We then switch to Dorian's point of view, and he's also not happy about being in temple. Quote, religion neither convinced nor moved him, and after hours of sitting in a pew, muttering prayer after prayer, he was in desperate need of some fresh air and solitude. I feel like with SJM, there is a huge theme of a religion, but not just religion, questioning religion. I feel like we see it in every single one of her series where, you and I, when we did our Crescent City analysis, book 1 and 2, you and I were just saying like book 1 felt like questioning faith and spirituality, while book 2 was the descent of falling out of spirituality and faith. And this is the same thing where we have two main characters who do not worship. However, even though we don't see Kale worshiping necessarily, I have no doubt that he is, an active participant in temple and going to these temples. But it's an interesting call out that none of her characters here, they question. They're not necessarily practicing.
I actually am going to challenge that, because I think it's a breadcrumb when Selena says, I worship in my own way. I took that to mean I don't worship in the way humans do. I worship in the way that the Fae do.
So that's where I'm going to make a case later that her worship is spirituality rather than quote unquote religion.
Fair.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you that Kale does practice religion because he's very by the book, right? He's very much like, are these the rules? Okay, I will follow them.
Yeah. I think that when you look into SJM's books, and this one in particular, the characters end up leaning more towards that spiritual, the mother, the ancestors. Like that's the route that they end up kind of going.
So while we're in Dorian's point of view, we learn not only what Jack is saying about how he's really not into religion, we also learn how other people around him similarly desecrate religion. Quote, his mother had used the ceremony as a chance to point out all the eligible ladies to him. He'd spent the entire service trying not to scream at the top of his lungs. I really, really empathize as someone who grew up in a religion where they put single people in one congregation so that y'all could figure out how to get married. Didn't work for me. But let's talk about this moment from a Marxist-ish perspective. I don't know what perspective I'm talking about. But a church or temple setting should be a place of solitude and sanctuary. That's what we normally associate with church and with temple. Instead, the queen is desecrating it by using it as a platform for her wedding planning. What we're seeing then is that Dorian, maybe Chaol, the queen, the court, are going to this church of a false god that nobody respects. It is just another version of court where everyone masquerades as obedient and pious members of its congregation. It's just like court. Whether or not you're loyal to the king or queen, you go to be present to convince everyone you're a good, noble person. This setting then is just another way for the queen to have power when the king is absent. It's not about worshiping ancestors or respecting the dead. It's not about respecting whatever god that they worship. It's about politics.
Yeah. It's another place to parade around.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense then why we go from Dorian listening to his mother talking about his, which woman to look into, to the very next line he runs into Celaena and he's like, I want you. Now let's get into Celaena's dress. Amy's about to make some points on it. I'm going to make some of my points. We're going to be referencing the quotes and taking different aspects out of it. Quote, it was the color of a mountain lake, that gem-like shade that didn't quite have a name. Not to mention the dress was about 100 years out of fashion. His gaze rose to her face, and he smiled. It's beautiful, and it's out of place, just like Celaena, and he is all about it. He's like, oh, you're not in fashion? That's exactly what my mother would hate. My mother would hate you. Yes, please. I want you. And, it's like, she's not a lady of the court. She doesn't fit in. She is everything that he wants.
Yeah, she's not performing the way the other courtiers are performing. I just want to point out that there are multiple references to Celaena's dress that are associated with water. One, Jack has already read. Quote, it was the color of a mountain lake. Later on, it's also described, quote, the folds of fabric like the flowing waters of a river. Now, I made up this connection. I was like, oh, maybe it's referencing the river that carried Aelin away from Terrasen to Adarlan and brought her here. And I think it's relevant when we think about fate, because fate is going to be a topic at the end of the episode. And that river really plays into Celaena's fate and how she got from, from princess to assassin. But I think there are also other reasons why this dress has water references that I'll save for later.
I can't remember your note. So if I'm taking your note, I'll edit this out. But, it makes sense because she's going to explore the tunnels in that dress.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Amy's note for later. Now, Dorian is looking at this dress and he is just thinking it is out of fashion, but damn, she's hot. Now, if we actually listen to what Celaena says, we can hear what it represents in my mind. Quote, Lady Lillian's servants were attending the service when she dressed, said Chaol. There was nothing else to wear. Of course, corsets required assistance to get in and out of, and the dresses were labyrinths of secret clasps and ties. I love that Chaol's the one who answers for Celaena, because it's almost like she's just so annoyed that she's even in this dress to begin with, that he's the one who has to tell her. I also have this mental image of Celaena storming around in her closet being like, I have nothing to wear. Chaol, can you tie me up? And he's like, I can't do anything. Like, that's scary. I can't touch you. And then she's like, damn it, this is the only thing I have left. But all fun moments aside, her clothing shows a product of her situation and that she is still a prisoner. Her help was not there. She does not have ladies' maids. She does not have assistants. She is at the whims of the palace. And because of that, she had no one to help her. It is not freeing. It's a reminder that she has no power. And in this case, her clothes show a lack of armor, a lack of power.
Mm-hmm. I also want to point out the fact that it's Dorian who's thinking, well, of course she can't do it on her own. There's a secret labyrinth of clasps and ties.
Yeah.
Because he's a fuckboy and he knows because he's helped take those dresses off.
And of course, Cale would never know because he's too innocent and pure.
Yeah.
I also just want to call this out so I can come back to this later. Quote, No, he said quickly, glancing at her feet. They were clad in red shoes, red like the winter berries, beginning to pop out on the bushes. You look very nice, just a bit out of place. What I'm noting here are those red shoes. Red. We're going to get a couple of red references. And just a reminder, red has been continuously associated with bad things, with evil, with his father. And we're seeing them kind of like, popping out of winter bushes, which is like white and pure. So, just kind of keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Nice visual.
Yep.
I can't remember if this is when Dorian is still with Celaena or if it's after they part, but he ruminates on the fact that Duke Parrington has a plan to use Nehemia to his advantage by keeping her hostage in Aderlin. Quote, not particularly inclined to add hostage taking to his repertoire of abilities, Dorian had spent hours arguing against it. But while some of the council members had also voiced their disapproval, the majority seemed to think the Duke's strategy to be a sound one. Still, Dorian had convinced them to back off about it until his father returned. That would give him time to win over some of the Duke's supporters. Deep down, we see Dorian's actually a good guy. And I think it's extra good because he doesn't advertise it. He doesn't talk to Cale about it. He doesn't talk to Celaena about it or Nehemia. He's trying to do what he feels is his responsibility by saying, that's morally incorrect. We're not going to keep a princess hostage just for our own political gain. Unfortunately, though, his efforts are not attached to meaningful power. He has to borrow the power of his father, saying, my father isn't here, let's wait for him, in order to salvage time to play the political games for Nehemia's sake. Mm-hmm. So he's a good guy. Unfortunately, he's not capable of much.
I can confirm that this is when they're all still together because he looks at Nehemia and he thinks all of this. And I was surprised because I was thinking, wow, Dorian is really stepping it up. And as a prince, we keep harping on him about not being a prince and that he just sits there and is bitching about his boring life. And hey, you can go be a prince. And now he kind of is. Quote, if he were anyone but the crown prince, he would warn her. But if Nehemia left before she was supposed to, the Duke would know who had told her and inform his father. Things were bad enough between Dorian and the king. He didn't need to be branded as a rebel sympathizer. So it's to a point, right? Like he is growing and helpful of Nehemia to a point because he doesn't want to risk things. He doesn't want to come up with a different elaborate plan to help her get out. But again, we're getting a little bit more strategy from him than we ever had before. And we then suddenly get to see him use his brain. I haven't seen him use his brain this entire book, especially when he says why he isn't going to take Celaena to the feast. Now, however, he doesn't actually say it. He thinks this part. Quote, he couldn't bring her to the feast, not with so many watching. There would be too many questions, not to mention too many people. Keeping track of her would be difficult. Yes.
I have a thought before you go to your next point, but you finish.
It's just funny how they feel like they couldn't tell her that, where they had to like keep that a secret of, that's valid, saying, look, we can't I'm sorry, you can't go. You have to stay in. It's just going to bring in too many questions. Instead, it's just you are forbidden to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yay, miscommunication trope. Or lack of communication.
I think it's withholding entirely.
Yeah. What I appreciate about Dorian at this point in the story is that we're seeing his goodness, but we're seeing how his lack of power holds him back from really delivering on his goodness, right? I think that if he had a greater position of power, if he weren't, if his wings weren't clipped by his father, per se, he could do whatever the fuck he wanted.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have the power to control Celaena. Celaena knows it.
Yep.
he doesn't have the power to convince everyone that he's not a rebel sympathizer. So he is looking out for himself right now more than he's looking out for anybody else. And quite frankly, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
When we've seen just how powerless he is.
Yes. I mean, I'll blame him.
It's hard to do the morally right thing when you have no power.
Yeah. But I feel like it's easy for me to judge not being in this book. So
yeah. So you'll judge.
I'll judge. We'll be right back.
Your hair is so much more than what you see when you look in the mirror. And that's why as I get older, I worry about stress, nutrition, hormones, and my lifestyle and what those effects will have on my hair and my body overall. That's why I've started taking Nutrafol's science-backed whole body approach program, which nourishes growth from within to achieve my best hair.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
While many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol clinically tests final formulations to ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol Women Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months.
Everyone's root cause of hair thinning are different, so one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas that are tailored to give your hair what it needs to grow throughout different stages, such as postpartum and menopause, as well as for different lifestyles such as plant-based diets.
So start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code BOOKTALK. That's BOOKTALK.
Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, that's spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code BOOKTALK.
That's Nutrafol.com, promo code BOOKTALK, BOOKTALK.
Now, there's this moment between Kale and Dorian, and it's meant to be a ha, men are talking type moment, but I don't like it. So, quote, perhaps allowing them, and at this point, Kale and Dorian, like I said, are talking, and they're talking about Nehemia and Selena. Quote, perhaps allowing them to be friends was a horrible, dangerous idea. The captain clapped him on the shoulder. You think that's bad? Then he says something like, you should see him when they really get going. And, we're like, oh my God, that's so funny. Men are bonding. The women are bonding. And it just is like, okay, but women aren't allowed to be friends because now they're teasing him. They're cornering the guys. So then it becomes like women are meant to be controlled. Now people might be rolling their eyes as I say this, saying, they're just being guys. They're just being funny. It's just a funny thing to say. However, you're at the wrong podcast. You're here to overanalyze. It's men treating women like other. It's always rubbed me the wrong way, even in my everyday life of like, I'm right here, bro. Also, you think it's bad that I'm with this friend and I'm talking shit on, like I'm just talking back, just watch me. I will really talk back. So, women are still a commodity here and in real life.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should just start saying, I really don't think I should allow you to be friends with him. Randall, I really don't think I should allow you to be friends with him.
Yeah. I saw this thing on TikTok and it was, how they always say, a key that can unlock any lock is a good key, but a bad lock if, it's just men saying why men can sleep around and women can't. And this woman was like, a mouth cleaned by many toothbrushes is a clean mouth. A toothbrush that cleans a lot of mouths is a dirty toothbrush.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that good? Yeah. A library that holds many books is knowledgeable. A book that's been to many libraries is tattered.
Yeah. It's so good.
Isn't that good?
That's so good.
Yeah. Also, shout out to SJM. She's freaking hilarious. Quote, this is Dorian. he hadn't meant to annoy her with talk about the dress, though it was outdated, nor had he known she'd be that irritated about not being invited to the feast. But Dorian scowled and walked off to the kennels. Like he's literally a dog walking away with his tail but tucked between his legs. It's just really funny. It's a great visual.
It is a great visual. Now I just see Rowan with his tail in his little butt.
Not the character.
Oh, sorry, not the character, my dog. My dog. When we return to Celaena's point of view, she is gleeful at how Nehemia challenges Chaol. And this isn't the first time it's happened, and I'm sure it won't be the last. I feel like Celaena gets a lot of joy out of watching women challenge and annoy men.
Yeah.
And that in some ways she feels vicarious power. It's almost as if she's doing it, but she's not, right? And she enjoys that struggle.
I love seeing men picked on.
Yeah, it's true.
Brings great joy.
I think that must be feminine joy. That's one version of feminine joy. I also think she gets joy out of it because she's seeing authorities of Adarlan threatened, right? Anytime Chaol is badgered, anytime Dorian is put down, it's joyful because essentially it's sticking it to the man, right?
That's even patriarchy.
Even though these two men are really not the cause of the problem at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But they perpetuate the problem. However, it does go too far when Nehemia rants about the king of Adarlan. Quote, "A shudder went through Celaena and she interrupted before Nehemia could say more." I think this is important because Celaena senses danger towards Nehemia. We as readers know this to be true because of Dorian's point of view. But Celaena's never been told anything to suspect that ill intent towards Nehemia. But in a world where women are othered, are treated violently, and where Nehemia's people, the Eelway people, are put into Endovir, I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that, and Celaena doesn't either.
Mm-hmm. In this moment with Nehemia and Celaena, we see that there's a lot of power in words. And earlier in this book, SJ made a point to say that libraries were the most dangerous places because of ideas. Libraries, books, words. Very powerful. So then you have this quote, "Your king might not be fully versed in their language, but she was smart enough to know the power of saying those two words, your king, not hers." Nehemia in this moment, because she's talking to Chaol and she says something about like, well, you're king. She knows what she's doing. There might be a language barrier, but she can clearly use language as a weapon. And then, while they're all walking, Chaol and Celaena still have this moment. I know how things end. We're only going up to book 3. I know how things end there. I know how it works out. But I still am getting butterflies and kicking my feet, giggling for all these moments. So, quote, "She shrugged, not quite understanding the gleam in his eyes. You told me." Oh, so at this moment, Chaol, she says something about Chaol's brother's name. And Chaol's like, "Oh my God, you remember my brother's name? We're meant to be." And Celaena says, quote, "She shrugged, not quite understanding the gleam in his eyes. You told me. Why wouldn't I remember it? He looked handsome today. It was in the way his hair met his golden skin, in the tiny gaps between the strands, in the way it fell across his brow." I'd be screwed because I wouldn't remember anyone's name. I'd be like, "Your brother, Joe Schmo, right?" And it's because in this moment she's considering his feelings and, the name of his family, and he's finding it attention is being paid to Chaol, and his best friend is the prince. Guaranteed attention is paid more to Dorian than to Chaol, and now it's on him. So of course he's feeling extra flattered by this. I also want to note the golden skin. As we've kind of talked about, sunshine, gold, rays of gold, light. It's been depicted in moments that's not necessarily good, highlighting we talked about the gold or the sunlight highlighting the blood from one of the champions. So just flagging these things because we're going to see later on in this section, in this episode, how much moonlight represents truth and good and purity.
Great point.
Thank you. Chaol and Celaena have this adorable moment. Quote, "As my friend, you should either bring me along or keep me company." This is Celaena talking about being left behind. "Friend?" he asks. She blushed. "Well, scowling escort is a better description, or reluctant acquaintance if you prefer." To her surprise, he smiled. For me, it's bring me food. I'm offended. Even when Amy has gone to like work dinners and I'm seeing you after, I'm always like, what leftovers can you bring me? Bring food. That's the obvious answer. He does better than that, though. SJM loves to try to get her characters to be friends first before bringing them together. Mm-hmm. It's very annoying because sometimes it's like, but we were friends. I'm like, you were never friends. You were interested in each other. If you wanted to bone them from the get-go, you were not friends. Although, you know, because they're already, like, these two are already romantically kind of interested. There's that attraction there. That being said, they're finding their peace and their quote-unquote friendship in this process. I also didn't realize how much progress was made in this book in their dynamic. I remember the first time I read this, I was so hyper-focused on Dorian. And because she's the one who says outright, I want to kiss him. He looks so good. Oh, he's dancing with that idiot blonde. And that's the one who, and I was like, oh, hot prince, of course that's the one she's going to be with. And I remember being kind of thrown and upset in the second book where I was like, Kale, it's not what I signed up for. But, you know, when you're reading this and you don't trust Selena, to Selena to be honest with herself, and you know that she's not honest with herself, all the times that she says that she wants to kiss Dorian are such red herrings. It's such her not wanting to pay attention to this relationship with Kale that's actually growing.
Yeah, I think in her mind, because she spends more time with Kale, it's easier to see him as a jailer than it is to see Dorian as a jailer. Dorian's just this figment that's off somewhere else. Kale's the one that pushes her and forces her body to perform to a certain level.
Yep.
So it's easy for Selena then to displace her desire to kiss Kale onto Dorian, because it makes more mental sense to want to kiss Dorian, who's done nothing bad to her body.
Which is confusing because I could easily imagine me kissing someone who has me locked up in handcuffs.
To your earlier point, I completely agree. You know, this is not a love triangle. This is a growing attraction between two individuals and a jealous friend.
Yep.
Saying, no, that's my shiny toy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was no actual love triangle happening. Now, in this moment, I even want to say he was like, might have messed with her hair or something like in that. Like, there's definitely this romantic, intimate moment, we'll say, between the two. And then in that exact moment, Selena gets emotionally, romantically cock-blocked by Nehemia. Quote, "The princess grabbed Selena's hand. 'You'll teach me,' she said in Eelway. 'Teach me how to better speak your language. Teach me how to write and read it better than I do now.' I don't like it. I'm not a fan. I don't like it. It's, you know, you're not being a real friend. And I do think Nehemia does this on purpose. I think that Nehemia is trying to keep that line between you're my ally, he's the enemy. You know, I think there's that moment of we're getting actual kind of conflict between Nehemia in this section, especially as Nehemia gets weird about the word marks, because they're going to see Cain crouching in the dirt, and we'll go to that in the breadcrumbs. And he's like no one's really like as concerned as they should be. Like if I saw someone crouching in the dirt, I'd definitely be a lot more fascinated of like, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
Nehemia, though, talks about the word marks and says that they're part of an ancient religion, coming back to the theme of religion, telling Selena to leave it alone. And when Selena denies knowing anything about it, Nehemia says, quote, "You're hiding something," the princess said softly in Eelway, though it was not accusatory. "You are much more than you seem, Lillian." And like, I know Selena marks it as not accusatory. I know Selena doesn't see it as a threat. It's hard as a reader to not see it as a threat, but that's just SJM doing a good job with us questioning everyone around her.
I agree with your earlier point that Nehemia is intentionally trying to keep Selena away from Kale. And I think that Kale sees it too. And he sees it in a way that is going to impact the way he interacts with Nehemia in the future. So that's my first thought. My second thought is the fact that when you look at the number of pages each character spends, when you look at the number of pages Kale versus Dorian versus Nehemia are on the page interacting with Selena, I would probably rank it Kale, Dorian, Nehemia.
Yeah, that's fair.
And maybe off screen that's not the case, but on screen it certainly is. And I'm inclined to believe or trust Nehemia the least. At least with Kale and Dorian, whose perspectives we get, there is more honesty and vulnerability between them and Selena. Nehemia is not vulnerable, forthcoming, and, you know, in this moment, Nehemia doesn't necessarily trust Selena, but you know what? Nehemia hasn't given Selena a real reason to trust her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so whether or not she views it as accusatory, it's also, for me, a projection of, well, I think the same thing about you.
Yep. I agree. So now we're going to go into chapter 24, and there's a lot of imagery we've seen so far, and as has with the sun related and the moon and the sun and rays of sun, all of that stuff, right? So let's get into moon. Quote, Selena lay on the bed, staring at the pool of moonlight on the floor. It fitted in the dusty gaps between the stone tiles and turned everything in a bluish silver that made her feel as if she were frozen in an everlasting moment. Moonlight it illuminates the dark. It's going to illuminate the lies. It's going to illuminate the truth. The sun can, if you think about it, can be blinding, right? It keeps you from seeing the actual truth, keeps you from seeing anything that's actually happening. Selena will think about the dark as something that is normally feared. Now, this is about, she opens the door and she's like, you know what? I see a tunnel. I want to go in that tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
I would never. And so she states that she normally doesn't fear the dark because that's where she works the most in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where she is probably the most comfortable. Instead, she considers the dark as, quote, the time when the stars emerged with glittering beauty and made her feel wonderfully small and insignificant. And that's because of, you know, the night and the stars. And when you look at the planets and everything, you feel insignificant. It puts things into perspective. It's calming, especially when you have someone like Selena whose entire life has blown up and, you know, there's so much drama surrounding her. And there's something comforting knowing that she is just a speck in this grander universe.
I think that this moment's really important for readers to really lean into because we've seen so much of Selena's arrogance, her pride, her self-aggrandizing nature, that it feels incongruent with her character for her to be like, I feel wonderfully small and insignificant when I look at the stars. Like, that's not something you would expect a prideful person to say.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a reminder of how her arrogance is a facade and that she's actually deeply complex in ways that we're not yet familiar with. Now, I understand how Selena's feeling, you know, laying on the bed, looking at the moonlight, feeling dejected. And we see that in her lack of motivation right now. Quote, her eyes were too heavy to read. She wouldn't play the pianoforte for fear of another embarrassing encounter. And she most certainly wouldn't amuse herself with fantasies of what the feast was like. Now, Selena loves these three things: reading, playing the piano, eating, or thinking of food. Food especially. Like,
I relate to her so much.
I do too.
Replace pianoforte with Taylor Swift. Sorry, continue.
It's equivalent. It's fine. Selena is unable to find joy in the things that normally bring her joy because ultimately she doesn't like being left out. She is cut off and she is being left out. And that is so detrimental to her that she cuts herself off from the things that give her power. Mm-hmm. The reading, the piano, the eating, or thinking about eating in this case. And I think that says a lot about how hurt she is, even if she won't necessarily vocalize how hurt she is.
She then opens the tapestry, like we were saying, like it goes over, and the tapestry was hiding the door the whole time. Quote, the tapestry was odd, old, and not very carefully preserved. Images of forest animals among drooping trees dotted the large expanse. A woman, the only human in the tapestry, stood near the floor. Now, we're going to find out that this is Elena, who the tapestry is showing. And I also love that the tapestry hasn't been maintained, just like Elena's sarcophagi has not been maintained. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make a point about how women are forgotten in history. And this also shows that we'll know that this is actually her ancestor. And I think that we're going to get this reflection of this is her ancestor. We don't know this at this point, but there's going to be an element of seeing herself in there, or at the very least, aspiring to be that free.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think it surprises anyone that Selena is like, ooh, hidden passages, a secret door. I must go explore, because she's got nothing better to do. Everyone's left her alone and to her own devices. Is it right to go explore these hidden passages? From Kale's perspective, no. But what does she care? She's been forgotten. However, before she goes too far, she prepares to explore like the smart assassin that she is. Note that when she grabs yarn to track her path, she knots it 5 times to the back of a chair. And it's very specific how it's like she knotted it 5 times. Why? So I had to look up numerology, because why not? In numerology, the number 5 represents freedom, adventure, and independence. Those are the things that Selena begins to experience in this chapter. You know, she's not completely free, she's not completely independent, but they are within her grasp.
Yep. I just love that she's so cool and knows how to prepare. Like, I never would have thought about the yarn. If I were to have gone in there, I'd be like, well, all right, this is the path I'm going. I'll make my way back up. Like,
yeah, I'll find it.
Yeah. How windy can it really be?
Yeah.
And then she like brings yarn, she brings everything. She brings like a whole ass pack. She's cool. Now she goes into the tunnel. Quote, she tensed as she stepped down, waiting for a single sound that would send her springing back to her rooms. It was silent and dead and completely forgotten. I'm going to say that her descent into this is going to be a descent into her religious experience. Again, religion means different for different characters. This isn't going to be an actual practicing religion. This is going to be her celebrating her ancestors and finding that spirituality. She didn't go to temple, but she will go to this. And the silence is both threatening and comforting, you know, which is, I'm like, okay, just like the truth and darkness, you know, there's a lot of things happening.
Yeah, there is. As Selena travels through the passages, she senses increasing moisture, which she follows to its source. Quote, Selena chose to go straight, following the moisture that grew by the inch. Water trickled down the walls. She would have considered turning back were it not for the sound that arose. It was running water, slow-moving. In fact, as she walked, the passage became lighter. It was not the light of a candle, but rather the smooth, white light of the outdoors, of the moon.
The moon, we're coming back to it. The moon is lighting her path. Also, like I said, her red shoes. And so we have this moment where her red shoes is becoming more flimsy as she's going through the water, the wetness, the truth. She is being bathed. It is almost like a baptism of sorts. I just came up with that one. It reminds me of some of the other times we get like this watering, bathing experience. But, you know, you talk about, you know, I think in a lot of religions, you kind of get representation of feet, and her feet are being cleansed. These red shoes are being cleansed by this moonlit water.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I am going to go out on a limb and suggest that Selena's blue-green gown is also connected to all of this. Remember, there were descriptions of it flowing like water. I recognize part of the significance of the gown is its age, which, you know, on one hand makes her out of fashion with the court, which makes her a symbol of rebellion for Dorian, but I also think is also meant to further connect her to Elena, her ancestor, that she maybe looks more like Elena and is better able to access her. I also think water in and of itself is significant in several ways. Jack mentioned baptism, which is definitely something we talk a lot about in SJM Works. Water is also associated with life and with nature, and I think in this scene, freedom. It's the presence of water that leads Selena to the forgotten stream under the castle, and which ultimately leads to a forgotten getaway, a forgotten way to escape the castle. Just the knowledge of that is liberating for Selena. Quote, it would be so easy to raise the gate. She felt reckless and wild. What was she doing in the palace? Why was she, Aderlin's assassin, participating in some absurd competition to prove that she was the best? She was the best. Just knowledge of the stream and the exit it leads to are enough to restore Celaena's confidence that she's been lacking over the last few chapters. So I don't think it's coincidence that this is all happening while Celaena is wearing this particular dress. As Jack had said, water, if we see water as a symbol for truth, Celaena is uncovering truth while layered in this symbol of water, that which is very baptismal, right? Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, the water washing her, soaking her red shoes, washing away. You could see that as like washing away sins almost. Her feet are being baptized. It's like the past 10 years of her life and the experiences she's had. She's being cleansed from them. So that she is prepared for the encounter she's about to have with Olenna.
What I also freaking love about this and like the path and everything, because, she finds this potential escape route, but it's water that's going through there. But what is different with this water? The waste is going through this water. She makes a note of how the smell and that there's waste. So this is not the cleansing, purifying water. And I think that her coming to this point where she's like, I can get out. I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm the best. That is her pride and her ego coming on. I feel like you can almost say that this is a test of her own self also, like kind of, again, that religious spiritual test, because she needs to be tested and cleansed before meeting with this ancestor, this higher being. And in order to be shown worthy of this, if she wanted to, she could have gone out into the night. She could have gone and run away. Instead, she chooses to stay. And we'll get into that reason in a moment of why she stays. But just note that although that's water that would get her to freedom, it's tainted water. So in this moment, though, quote, her yarn ran out and she left it on the ground. There was no more turns or marks. I can't remember if it was in this exact moment or a little bit ahead. But at one point, that does happen. And I do want to say that it leans more into evidence of this idea of moving on faith. The yarn has run out. She's surrendering to what's going on here. She's going to have faith to make her way back out.
That's a great image, a great symbol. And I appreciate you reminding us of the wastewater, because I forgot. But I think it actually lends itself really well to the point I'm about to make, which is, despite how badly Celaena wants to flee the castle, she ultimately doesn't give in to the temptation. So that exit way through the wastewater, it is a symbol of temptation. And she doesn't give in despite the surge of pride that she feels. And what's her reason? So her reasoning to herself is, quote, the king would find her somehow, and Chaol would be disgraced and relieved of his position, and Princess Nehemia would be left alone with moronic company. And, well, she would not run from them as a common criminal. She would face them, face the king, and earn her freedom the honorable way. And why not take advantage of the free food and training for a while longer? Not to mention she needed to stock up on provisions for her escape, and that could take weeks. Why rush any of it? I think there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, Chaol and Nehemia are important in that order.
Yeah.
There is... And it's especially poignant that it's Chaol first, right?
Yeah.
Chaol would be disgraced, which tells us how much she cares about Chaol and his position.
Yep.
There is absolutely no mention of Dorian. He is the red herring love interest in this book. But despite being able to resist the temptation, her pride still comes into play. It is her pride that makes her stay and be, quote unquote, honorable. I think what's important here is the fact that her reasoning ends with take advantage of free food and training.
All of this is happening, just as a reminder, under the moonlight, cleansing, purifying, truth, everything. Her honor, even though she wants to joke around with the food and the training and everything, and there's valid reasons as to why she shouldn't run away right now. But like Amy pointed out, her reasoning, Chaol, Nehemia, there is honor to her not wanting to run away. And all of this is happening under the moonlight.
Yeah, I love that point. I think it's also important that we focus on this idea that A, the king would find her. That's her first reason. And B, take advantage of free food and training. Selena is not at full strength. We all know this. We are all constantly being reminded. Even if she wanted to leave and stay gone, she would have to be in prime condition to make that happen. So while she's saying, and she's making us believe, oh, she's taking advantage by staying. And in reality, I do think she is hiding her weakness. And even though she might not, as an unreliable narrator, she might not be honest with us, I do think she is internally honest with herself that I do need food. I do need provisions. She does, and I can guarantee she doesn't even know where she would go if she had freedom. Would she have allies to protect her? So ultimately, Selena's going to stay. She gets bonus points for not hurting, Kale's reputation. She gets bonus points for being friends with Nehemia and staying. I really think that if she were at full strength, she'd leave and then find a way to take Nehemia with her or apologize to Kale or something. Yeah. So after she decides to not escape, Selena returns to the passages and she finds another route that allows her to spy on the festivities in the Great Hall.
And when she sees, when she's lurking in the corners watching the Great Hall, she sees, quote, Kale sitting behind some old man talking and laughing. His happiness made her own face flush in response, and Selena set down her candle. She's interested in him. It's cute, but she's also distracting herself from her emotions. She gets flushed at his own joy, the fact that he's laughing and everything. And there's a lot more emotions than when she looks at Dorian.
So true. After she sees Kale, this is when Selena realizes that all the other champions are also there at the feast. Quote, the other champions were allowed to attend and she wasn't. Even the pimply-faced Peller sat near Kale. A half-right boy assassin. She bared her teeth. How dare she be denied an invitation to the feast? The tightness in her chest abated only slightly when she couldn't find Kane's face among the revelers. At least they kept him locked up in a cage, too. Selena equates her situation and Kane's situation to being locked up in a cage like animals, as if they are the only real threats.
She's not wrong.
She's not wrong to be upset about this.
I would be pissed off too. I would not handle it well. I would be. And the thing is, she can't even pretend like she knows either.
Yeah. Yep, she can't.
Selena then observes Dorian, quote, she spotted the crown prince dancing and laughing with some blonde idiot. She wanted to hate him for refusing to invite her. She was his champion after all, but she had difficulty not staring at him. She had no desire to talk to him, but rather just to look at him, to see what unusual grace and the kindness in his eyes that made her tell him about Sam. While he might be a Havillard.
I think it's Havillard.
Yeah. Well, he might be a Havillard. She very much wanted to kiss him. It just, when you have this idea and understanding that, her and Kale are the ones who are going to get together, this does feel very red herring-ish, she's looking at a hot guy is basically what she said. Yeah. He's hot. He had kind eyes. There we go. I guess I'll kiss him, compared to Kale when there's a lot more emotions happening there.
Also want to point out, women shouldn't pit themselves against each other. She calls the woman with Dorian some blonde idiot.
Yeah.
Selena's blonde.
And honestly, sometimes she's an idiot.
Yeah.
At one point, she puts Countdown Caltaine too, where I was and I couldn't even bother to mention it because I was just Aelin or Selena, what the okay, we'll come back.
Yeah. We switch to Dorian's point of view, and he has been partying. Oh, I should also mention Selena sees Kale leave the Great Hall, and so she's like, oh crap, what if he's coming to see me? So she sprints to her room. At this point, we switch to Dorian's point of view, and he's been partying. Quote, his head spun from the wine, and he was so tired from all the dancing that he was fairly certain that if he sat down, he'd fall asleep. We're reminded of how young and naive Dorian is. He has no sense of danger and doesn't feel the need to have his wits about him because he's comfortable relying on Kale. Even though they all know champions are being killed within the castle, it's fine for him to get drunk and fall asleep.
Stumbling around and just kind of go into it. Yeah, I want to read the quote that leads up to that quote. After hours of enjoying himself at the feast, Dorian entered Selena's rooms, not sure what exactly he was doing in the chambers of an assassin at 2 a.m, his head spun from wine. He is like, that's like, what are you doing? It is the equivalent of a, hey, you up? Text, except it's in person and you're drunk and you're going into her room. That's such an invasion of privacy. Also, I would hate waking up in the middle of the night to a drunk man in my room. Let's just put that into context. It doesn't matter that they had a talk. It doesn't matter that she could kick his ass. He is still a drunk man in a woman's room in the middle of the night.
Without being invited.
Unacceptable.
Yep.
So when he walks into Selena's room while she's asleep, he does note that she's laying on a red blanket. And like we said, red is evil. Red is Aderlin, Dorian's kingdom. And he likes that she's on the red blanket. Quote, Dorian thinks to himself, though she was asleep on the bed, she still wore that strange dress. Somehow it seemed far more fitting now that she lay sprawled upon the red blanket. There's something very sexual about, again, people are like, God, Jack, you're always back to sex. But however, she's sprawled on a red blanket. I'm saying that like, come on, guys. We all know that's the sexiest way to be sprawled upon a red blanket. But, you know, we have to keep in mind that sex and red are usually intertwined like that. And like the term sprawled is also like a very, you know, sexy word too.
And in Jack's defense, that was also my note. So I see it too.
Yeah. It's a sexy sprawl.
It is a sexy sprawl. Now, when Dorian is looking at Selena, his drunk mind is trying to rationalize his attraction to her. He knows she's an assassin, but in this moment, he feels no intimidation. I wonder why. Maybe because she's asleep. Quote, he knew her.
Sorry, that's just really funny. He's not intimidated by her at all, by her unconscious body. Good note. Continue.
Thank you. Quote, he knew her somehow, and he knew she wouldn't harm him. It made little sense. When they talked, as sharp as her words usually were, he felt at ease, as if he could say anything. Now, I do think this is SJM doing some good work, misguiding us, maybe leading us down a garden path to believe that maybe they have some bond, some sort of connection. But really what this is Dorian sees someone who he thinks is like him, right? Even though their experiences are very different, there are similarities. So he's like, oh, we're connected. We've experienced the same things. I also think, you know, inebriated Dorian does not have good judgment. And he is like prey being fooled by the predator. And I'm going to say in this instant that Selena is the predator and Dorian's the prey, even though he's acting like the predator right now.
Yeah. Agreed. No, I was like, I'm like, oh, yeah. Agreed. No. There's no correction. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Ultimately, though, if we go back to the red blanket, I think what this really gets to is this idea of Dorian needing to rebel and needing to possess Selena to feel rebellious. And so by needing to possess Selena, he's putting on blinders to the reality of who she is. It is therefore unsurprising when he discovers Kale is already in Selena's room.
What are these men doing in her room? What are these men just hanging out, having a party in there?
Yeah. It's not surprising then that there's jealousy on Dorian's part because his opportunity to possess, to achieve rebellion is denied. And quote, Dorian, for some reason, didn't sleep well that night.
Yep. I want to go into my point of view of that section. Quote, when they talked as sharp as so this is Dorian reflecting on his conversation with Selena. When they talked, as sharp as her words usually were, he felt at ease, as if he could say anything. She must have felt the same after she told him about Sam, whoever he'd been. So here he was, in the middle of the night. She flirted with him, but was it real? I was like, are they having the same conversation? Did they have the same conversation? Now, granted, Selena says his eyes were kind, and that's why she told him about Sam. I question if Selena was even having the same conversation that we read. Yeah. She was really exasperated with him and then told him. He also wasn't kind. He was a douchebag the entire time. Then he was like, oh man, I feel bad now. So there's a definite distortion of like what actually happened in that conversation. And you know, the fact that she was so defeated when she told him about Sam, it wasn't a moment of necessarily connection. She was really defeated. And then he kind of goes like, so that's why she was here, because that's why he's there in her room, because she flirted with him. Like, you go from, she told me about Sam, we flirted, I'm in her room, I don't know what more she wants from me. I'm doing all the things that she's clearly wanting me to do. Amy's covering her mouth just with pure frustration.
Not to bring up painful memories.
Okay.
But we know people who are like this, who take advantage of vulnerable women. Or we used to know people who have acted like this.
Who?
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Okay.
Takes advantage of vulnerable women who might emotionally be vulnerable or physically be vulnerable because they're drinking, and be like, you know what? They flirted with me. I'm allowed to be here. I'm allowed to do things.
Yep.
No. This is unacceptable.
Oh shit, I know who you're talking about. You're talking about
I didn't want to say the name.
I'll bleep it. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This moment makes me think of
That is 100%, and I'll say it, like, I'm fine. I'll be honest with it. I was 100% emotionally manipulated into an intimate moment with a guy, like, just taking advantage of vulnerability. And oh my god, I forgot his name. Oh shit.
I mean, when I was like this, covering my mouth, that's when it dawned on me. I was like, oh,
little did he know I'm an assassin too. You're fucking right. It gives me an extra nasty taste in my mouth now.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad, Dorian. Like, which, you know, A, this is why Selena and Dorian will never work out.
Yeah.
B, why when Dorian does fall in love, it's so poignant. And C, the rest of his journey and who he becomes is so different.
Yeah.
From this Dorian.
Yep, absolutely.
This is a misguided, entitled boy.
And they become friends, and they're tight.
Yes.
And that's where they belong. And that's absolutely where they belong.
Yeah.
But at this moment, Kale comes in and kicks him out, and I love it. I love Kale kicking him out. I love a protectiveness there.
I want to clarify, Kale's already in the room.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that he's in the room. He's not drunk. He's there to give her a present. Although we don't know how long he's been there.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's just okay.
Edward from Twilight trained me. It's okay to watch someone while they're sleeping. It's okay. That's not creepy at all. But he comes in, right? He kicks him out. And now we're in Kale's point of view. Quote, he didn't understand the rage that arose upon seeing Dorian standing in the doorway. Didn't want to understand that sort of anger. It wasn't jealousy, but something beyond it. Something that transformed his friend into something else. Someone he didn't know. He was fairly certain she was a virgin. But did Dorian know it? We kind of talked about it. Like, what are the clues? She's actually pretty, like, overt with her sexuality and her body. And I feel like there's no clues about her being a virgin at this point. However, he's also not wrong, but weird thing to point out there. And also weird thing that he finds comfort in, because knowing that Dorian isn't a true threat because she's still a virgin.
That's a really, really good point. I saw it from a different perspective. I saw it as Kale starting to villainize his best friend.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Which shows you how Kale feels about Selena, but also is not going to be good for their relationship in the long term.
Yeah. Again, meanwhile, she's just asleep. I'd be snoring. I snore. You can't have this romantic moment. It's not romantic. It's creepy, predatory. Damn it, Jack. Train my brain. It's not Robert Pattinson.
No, it's not. And also, I know she acts like she's asleep, but she just came from the passages, and Dorian remarks how her face is, like, pink. Like, she's pretending to be asleep.
Okay. I didn't realize that. I was like, oh no, she fell asleep really quickly. It's been hours. It makes sense though, because for whatever reason, I was like, oh yeah, she's asleep. So what? Like, it took him a couple hours to get to her room.
Can I read the part?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Just to clarify. Okay. Her golden hair was spread around her, and a flush of pink bloomed on her cheeks. A book lay by her side, open and still waiting for her to turn the page. She wasn't reading before this. She had no motivation to read. She is pretending to be asleep.
She's better than me. She's better than me. I love her. I love it that she's like listening to these guys argue and she's like, what the fuck?
Okay. Now we're in Cale's point of view. Dorian has left. And it is amazing how differently Cale views Selena as she sleeps compared to Dorian. I just happened to read what Dorian was, seeing and what he thought. He was like, oh, I know her. She's not dangerous. So this is Cale's point of view. Quote, she was still in her clothes, and while she looked beautiful, that did nothing to mask the killing potential that lay beneath. It was present in her strong jaw, in the slope of her eyebrows, in the perfect stillness of her form. She was a honed blade made by the king of assassins for his own profit. She was a sleeping animal, a mountain cat or a dragon, and her markings of power were everywhere. I get chills from that description because on one hand, yes, she is very powerful, but she's not the most powerful she's ever been. Now, Cale, having spent more time with Selena than Dorian, sees what Dorian can't in Selena, but I also think his capacity to always see threats makes his view of Selena biased. So we're getting these two extreme viewpoints of Selena, and I don't think either is necessarily the objective truth. I think both are colored by bias. And, they're both misappropriating her power and where her power lies. Yeah.
I mean, he views her as a cat and a dragon, deadly and mythical. Like, she's not even real. She's an animal. She's a mythical dragon. Like, those are...
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because for Cale to view Selena as a dragon, and a dragon is a mythical being, and he's a very by-the-book black and white person, that in and of itself signals how much more power he's giving Selena than she's actually capable of, which, becomes apparent in later in this episode. So he is putting her on a pedestal that is not a pedestal he wants her on, and she doesn't necessarily want to be on.
Yeah. Okay, I want you to scroll down until you're past my notes. Get into chapter 25 notes.
Okay.
Don't look at this.
Not looking.
Good. So everyone's about to hate me is the beginning of my next note. Cale gives Selena a silver ring, right? He goes around and they're handing out party favors to everyone, and all the noble women get it, and he goes out of his way to get her this ring, even though he tells her to steal one, even though he tells her, like, it's no big deal. They're just handing them out. It's sweet. It's a good, real cute little thing here he's giving her. And, there's this idea and almost imagery of a proposal, but I'm going to argue that it's not a sign of a proposal. I want to take it one step farther. I want to remind everyone that he is the replacement of Arobin, almost a father figure. Dare I say, a purity ring. Amy's face. Because what did we know about his assumptions and guessing? Was her virginity.
Yes.
And that, it is something that he has to kick Dorian out of the room for. It is something to be protected. It is something, dare we say, is his. It is a moment to give upon her. It is a purity ring that he has given her.
A chastity belt.
Chastity belt, essentially. Here's the moment. Quote, then she was asleep, a hand upon her breast, the ring hovering over her heart. It's very Sleeping Beauty. It's very princess-like. It's the way that he views her. She's this damsel just sleeping with her hand upon her heart, and that the ring that he gave her is on her heart. It's a purity ring, guys. It's a...
Yeah. If not a purity ring, a promise ring.
But there's that father element that we've talked about.
Yeah.
There. I know. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Stick around for part 2, which airs on Thursday. Which airs on Thursday.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our forum at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit... Oh, sorry.
Whoa.
Sorry.
All right there.
I just want to finish.
We're almost done. If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk.
Bye.
Bye.
Let me just position everything where I want it to be.
Yep. Now you moved me.
Oh, no. So if I move
There we go.
me...
No, we're good.
Annoying.
We're good.
I don't need to look at myself.
Wait, did you move me or did I move you on accident? I think when one of us moves someone, we move.
Yeah, it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah, okay, don't do anything. And then, okay. I mean, you can move it so that I'm back so you can see me again.
No, I can see you, but you're below me, which is...
You can move it so that I'm on top of you.
Like that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
It switched for me, but I can move you over here, and now that's better.
Okay. I mean, I don't care. I can just lower the whole thing and not look at you at all.
Well, wow. Rude.
I mean, I get distracted. I do like looking at your face, so... As most of our listeners know, I'm getting married, and let me tell you, getting married is expensive.
Let me tell you, being a guest to your wedding is expensive, and that's where Acorns come in.
Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future, and in my case, my wedding.
You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you to your money goals.
You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change.
Money planning stresses me out quite a bit, and Acorns makes it so easy.
It only takes 5 minutes to create an account with Acorns and start investing. It gives you small, simple steps to get you and your money on track, which is sometimes just the hardest part.
I love it because no matter what age you are, it's always important to be able to take control of your money and your investments.
So sign up now and join the over 13 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/booktalk, that's BOOKTALK, or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid client endorsement compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the Roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.
When you think of skyrocketing brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, it's easy to credit their success to great products, sleek branding, and brilliant marketing. But here's the overlooked secret. The real magic lies in the engine behind the scenes, the business powering their business. For millions of brands, that engine is Shopify, making selling seamless for them and shopping effortless for us. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Aloe Yoga uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/retail, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/retail to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/retail.